Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's been 20 years since the discredited and mendacious doctor, Andrew Wakefield, published findings in The Lancet that sought to link the vaccination for measles, mumps, rubella with autism. The data had in fact been fabricated. The Lancet published a retraction. Wakefield himself had his licence to practice medicine in the UK revoked. The story should end there, but it doesn't. The shadow he cast was long and dangerous. An immediate drop in vaccinations did recover, but now, 2 decades on, the take-up of the MMR jab has fallen for the 4th year in a row. Experts say the impact's already playing out. 876 cases of measles confirmed in England this year, 3 times the number for the whole of last. And an increasing scepticism towards vaccinations for other diseases that can be life-changing or even fatal. So tonight, we're not going to rehash the debate about autism and MMR. We're going to ask why the anti-vaxxers, as they're known across the pond, seem to be regaining the upper hand in telling us when facts can simply be dismissed. Have we had enough of experts, or do we genuinely believe science is now up for debate? Here's David Grossman.
This is the story of a virus and how it spread around the world, infecting countless millions. This is not, though, a biological virus, but an idea that is now blamed by some doctors for the deaths and illness of children on every continent.
You get these messages rippling through society, completely unmediated by the traditional gatekeeper, the television producer or the newspaper journalist, and these messages are now out of control.
Thousands queue for vaccination as a small outbreak of smallpox hits Brighton.
Vaccines have been one of humanity's success stories. Smallpox was wiped out after 2 centuries of diligent vaccination, started by English doctor Edward Jenner.
Even in Jenner's day, there was huge resistance to his ideas. People were naturally repulsed with the thought of injecting themselves with a disease supposedly to inoculate them against something else. Our instinct to protect ourselves and our children is, after all, highly evolved. And yet we flattered ourselves as a species that we'd overcome this irrational fear. The latest statistics, though, tell a different story.
Coverage for the MMR vaccine for children reaching their 2nd birthday fell to 91.2%, the 4th consecutive year that MMR coverage has decreased. The World Health Organization recommends that coverage is at least 95%, but England-wide MMR coverage for children reaching their 5th birthday has now fallen to 94.9%. It is another English doctor, now former doctor, Andrew Wakefield, who's blamed for the fall. He was struck off the medical register for research that the GMC called dishonest in its methods. He falsely connected the MMR vaccine with autism in children, no matter that every study since has shown no such link. The virus was released and spread. Journalist Brian Deer uncovered the Wakefield fraud, but nothing, it seems, can kill off its impact.
I think it goes down to individual identity of people for whom it's important to believe that they're smarter than doctors. So you see big clusters of unvaccinated children in Northern California, close to San Francisco, where you have an immensely prosperous, highly educated community who simply believe that they're clever. It's also an area where people are much more into New Age thinking.
So medical research becomes a matter of opinion. Everyone gets to have their own take.
I did a lot of research and ultimately made the decision that the risk factors of getting the vaccination outweighed the risk factor of a measles outbreak.
So what can governments do? Well, given that people are going to search the internet for facts, Brian Deer says the authorities need to build easily discoverable websites where the truth can be found and shared.
I think the government needs to play, and public health generally needs to play, a rather cleverer game than the one they're playing at the moment, and respecting parents to be capable of doing their own research. If you talk to the public health doctors, they're a bit of a one-trick pony, really. They do measles scare. And after a while, I think that constant sort of drumbeat begins to wear off in itself.
But this isn't just a rich nation problem. In India, vaccination rates are down. Video scare stories spread by WhatsApp have infected the population.
I'm scared after seeing this video that if my children take this vaccine, they won't be able to reproduce when they grow up.
It's clear then that medical science doesn't have to counter just one type of virus. There are those that affect our bodies and those that affect our minds.
Well, that was David Grossman. We're joined now in the studio by Helen Donovan, the professional lead for public health at the Royal College of Nursing, and Dr. Pauline Patterson from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine's Vaccine Confidence Project, and from Connecticut by Professor of Philosophy Michael Patrick Lynch. Very nice to have you all here. And Helen, I'm just going to start with you. What are you actually seeing? What are the effects that we've already noticed from this drop?
So what we've seen is that there's been this year-on-year decrease. It's only a small decrease, but it's significant because we were seeing an increase over the period of time that you spoke about in your film. And that's worrying because we don't really know why that is. There's several reasons why it could be. We know that the WHO recommend that we need to have 95% of all our children immunised against all of our vaccines.
Because without that 95% threshold, it doesn't work as an immunisation programme.
Well, we don't see the population, so we talk about herd immunity, so enough of the population are protected so that if you do see occasional cases of infection, not everybody gets it, and that's the important thing. That's why we have to have such high coverage.
And do you think this is specifically linked to MMR and to the Wakefield diagnosis, in commas, or is it across the board with vaccinations?
So we're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it against quite a few of the vaccines that we measure for children, and I think that's the interesting thing as well. So yes, MMR is worrying, and we're seeing cases of measles, particularly in European countries. And we're seeing them coming over into this country, but it's other vaccines as well, and that's the worrying trend for us as well.
Pauline Patterson, you're tasked, I guess, with trying to work out what's driving this. Some of it presumably will be very pragmatic reasons, you know, inconvenience or people forget or whatever. But is there a complacency which is rooted in something more akin to fear?
I think vaccination coverage, although it has dipped, is still very high, and so vaccines are a victim of their own success. And if, for example, a parent doesn't see the disease within the community, they may not feel the need to vaccinate their child.
So, in a way, it's because we've virtually eradicated some of these diseases that people forget they were ever a problem.
Yes.
So what do you think is the way to get it back up again? Because, you know, you heard in that film, all it takes is a video scare story, and in India it's going to be a bigger problem, presumably, or the fact that public health has slightly run out of the scare story of measles, right? Because nobody believes it anymore. So what do you do?
In addressing vaccine hesitancy, it's key to understand the reasons why people aren't vaccinating. So the first thing to do is, now that we've seen this dip in coverage, to then go and talk to people and understand their reasons for not vaccinating, and then addressing those reasons.
And when you hear them, what do people say?
So there can be a mixture. In our research at the Vaccine Confidence Project, we look at other countries as well, other vaccines, not just childhood vaccines, and we see reasons. So this complacency, the lack of perceived need for the vaccine, but also concerns around safety, concerns around effectiveness.
That's what nurses say to us as well, that people are asking questions, and from a nursing point of view, they need to have the relevant information, they need to have all the information.
It's really interesting, this. I'm just going to bring in Michael Patrick Lynch. The question of people now being, in David's film, smarter than doctors, even with a very highly educated community like California, people thinking they can search up what they like and they can find out their own truth from the internet, so they choose what to believe.
Indeed, Google has brought us a world of information right to our fingertips through the devices we carry around in our pockets. But as your film indicated, it has also brought us a world of disinformation. And that means that people can increasingly, despite the fact they're getting very bad information, feel like they're experts themselves because they can, as we say, Google it. And that's compounded by the fact that the internet is deeply personalized now. Everything that we read on the internet is often tailored to fit our unique preferences, from the ads that we read online to the news stories that come up on our Facebook feed. And that, too, can reinforce the sense that we can be our own experts on almost any topic. And that's great in a sense when you're shopping for shoes to have a personalized internet, but it's not so great when you're shopping for facts, because when you're just getting the facts that fit your unique preferences, that ends up inflating your bubble rather than, bursting it.
So is it because we feel smarter, or is it because authority has let us down, we don't have the same sense of deference, we don't want to believe the experts anymore?
Well, no doubt it's a combination of both, and it's very difficult, of course, to say precisely why attitudes shift on matters like this. But certainly part of it is a growing sense of what we might think of as arrogance on the part of the ordinary consumer, arrogance of a certain type, that we know it all. And that know-it-allism is reinforced by the ease of access we have to information. It also is compounded, of course, by people's perception that experts themselves are arrogant, that they aren't explaining, or they're hiding, or they're not giving all the information. And of course, on top of all of this, in the background, is a growing cynicism about truth that's eating away at the foundations, not only at our trust in science, but our trust in governments. That's especially true right now in my country, but it does seem like we're seeing troubling signs of it, that virus, so to speak, spreading throughout the world.
And Pauline Baston, if I just come back to you, is this the fault of the medical community up to a degree? Is it the fault of the media for running stories saying X gives you cancer one day and X, Y gives you cancer the next day? Or is it what we would call democratization of knowledge, that everyone has, 280 characters now to make their point, every tweet is the same length, and everyone can be seen as having equal weight when it's in cyberspace?
Yes, I think in the latter, so anyone can be seen as an expert on social media, on the internet, and also concerns can spread very quickly with the internet, with social media. And so what we've been seeing in our research is that concerns that are, for example, in Japan, have then moved into India, have moved to the US. These concerns are spreading quickly, and also people are able to group that weren't able to group before via the internet.
So, Helen, when people come to you and you said that, these are the parents who are asking questions, do you say, are you very blunt? Do you say, you're wrong, trust us, you have to do this? Or do you say, don't do it if you don't feel good about it?
I think the key thing from our point of view and from a nursing profession is that we know that actually the public do trust us. The attitudinal surveys, the surveys that are done, suggest that we are trusted. So the key thing for us is to listen to people and to try and answer the questions that they pose. So if they have heard something on the internet or they've got a particular question, and that's the tricky thing, to make sure that we are as up to date with all the information that's out there.
Because I guess, Michael Lynch, the way some of these movements work, and the anti-vaxxers, let's not pretend, it is a movement now, just as the Russian bots are a movement that try and push you away from vaccination. This is about who controls the narrative. This is about who has power. This is, if you like, about whether you can create a public health scare by messing with what people can believe, right?
Indeed. When people buy into these conspiracy theories, and that's essentially what anti-vaccination movements are, they're buying into a narrative that feels empowering, that reinforces the thought of know-it-allism that we talked about a moment ago, but also reinforces the idea that that information, the truth, is something that they have uncovered personally. And that is a very powerful feeling thing. That's the sort of powerful feeling that can be played upon by people who want to, for whatever reason, create these public scares. And it's very dangerous.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thanks.